I never considered myself anyone special at work. I was the kind of employee who showed up on time, stayed late if I had to, and kept my head down. In the company directory, my name probably barely registered with anyone beyond my immediate department. I wasn't the guy who made dazzling presentations or closed million-dollar deals. I was the one making sure the little things got done, the reports filed, the data checked, the small crises patched up before anyone noticed. Maybe that's why I often felt invisible. Hardworking, yes. Reliable, sure. But appreciated? Rarely. I had dreams of moving up one day, of course. Everyone did, but I had also learned the cruel reality of office life. Promotions went to those who played politics, not those who burned the midnight oil. That night, I was about to shut my laptop. The office was already quiet, lights dimmed, and most of my coworkers had gone home hours earlier. I had a lukewarm cup of coffee on my desk and a bus ticket waiting in my pocket. I was thinking about nothing more than reheating leftovers at home and maybe watching an old movie before collapsing into bed. My back ached from sitting all day, and my eyes were gritty from staring at spreadsheets. Then my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was just another app notification, but when I glanced down, my heart skipped. It wasn't an app. It was a call, from him. My boss. I froze, staring at the screen. He never called me directly. Emails, yes. Group messages, sometimes. But a personal call? At nearly 9 at night? My thumb hovered over the screen, debating whether I should even answer. Finally, I swiped. Hello. I said, voice uncertain. There was a pause, the kind that stretches longer than it should. Then came his voice, calm, measured, but strangely softer than it usually was in the office. Are you still at work? Yes, sir, I replied automatically. My throat tightened. Had I done something wrong? Was he about to pile another assignment onto my already overflowing plate? I need your help, he said. Those 4 words should have been simple. But the way he said them made my stomach knot. Not we need your help. Not the team needs your help. I need your help. Personal. Direct. I swallowed. Of course, sir. With what exactly? Another pause. I heard him sigh as though he were weighing how much to tell me. Not work. Something else. It's personal. That was the last thing I expected. Personal? My boss and I weren't friends. We weren't even close colleagues, really. He was the kind of man who kept a distance from his employees, preferring authority over camaraderie. Hearing him admit vulnerability, even in that vague phrasing, was startling. My instinct screamed that this was unusual, maybe even risky. But another part of me, the part that had been desperate for recognition, hesitated. Maybe this was my chance to stand out. What do you need? I asked carefully. His voice lowered, almost conspiratorial. I've been dealing with a lot of back pain. Hours at the desk, no exercise. It's gotten unbearable. I don't trust many people with this, but I thought you might be willing to come by and help me out. I blinked at my phone, stunned. Back pain? Help him out? Was he asking me to, what? I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't a physical therapist. What made him think I was the right person for this? Sir, I don't really know anything about that kind of thing, I stammered. You don't need to, he interrupted smoothly. Just a bit of pressure. Stretching, maybe. I'll guide you. I'd be grateful. Grateful. That word carried weight. Coming from anyone else, it might have seemed casual. Coming from my boss, it felt loaded with implication. I hesitated, gripping the phone tighter. My instincts battled inside me. Part of me wanted to say no, to draw a clear line to protect my boundaries. But another part whispered, what if this is an opportunity? He wouldn't call me unless he had some reason. Maybe this was a test of loyalty. Maybe this was how trust started, the kind of trust that led to promotions, to new doors opening. Still, it was strange. Too strange. Sir, I began cautiously, are you sure you want me for this? I mean, there must be. I'm sure, he cut in gently but firmly. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think I could count on you. That silenced me. Those words, count on you, dug under my skin. I'd spent years working thanklessly, and now here he was saying he trusted me. That trust wrapped around my hesitation like a rope, pulling me toward yes. I looked around the empty office, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. Saying no might mean closing a door I hadn't even realized was open. Saying yes meant stepping into unknown territory with all the risks that came with it. Finally, I exhaled slowly. All right. Where should I go? He gave me his home address. Not the office. Not some neutral place. His home. That only added to my unease. I ended the call and sat there for a long moment, staring at my darkened screen. My pulse quickened and my palms felt damp. I wasn't sure if I was walking into a favor, a trap, or an opportunity. But I knew one thing: whatever this was, it wasn't normal overtime. And I had just agreed to it. The cab ride to his place felt longer than it really was. I sat in the back seat, staring out at the blur of city lights, trying to make sense of what I had just agreed to. My boss's address wasn't far from the office, but it felt like I was crossing some invisible border, one I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. What was I doing? I wasn't a masseuse. I wasn't a personal trainer. I was an office employee, a glorified assistant at best. Helping with reports, scheduling, handling numbers, that I could do. But helping him with his back pain? It didn't make sense. And yet, the thought of saying no never fully solidified. The way he had said, "I count on you," still echoed in my head, digging into the part of me that longed for recognition. Maybe, just maybe, this was my moment to be noticed, not as a faceless worker but as someone he could rely on. When the cab stopped, I realized my hands were damp. I wiped them on my pants before stepping out. His building loomed above me, sleek, modern, and far nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived. Glass and steel glistened under the streetlights, a sharp contrast to my own small apartment and its flickering kitchen bulb. I buzzed his unit, and his voice came through the speaker, low but expectant. "Come on up." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, except for the thud of my own heartbeat. When the doors slid open, I found myself in front of a polished oak door. I knocked, and almost immediately it opened. He stood there in casual clothes, sweatpants and a fitted t-shirt, not the pressed suits I was used to seeing him in. It was strange, almost disarming, to see him like this. He looked less like the intimidating boss who commanded a room and more like a man who was simply tired. "Glad you came," he said with a small nod. His voice lacked the sharp authority it carried in the office. It was softer, more personal. I stepped inside. His apartment was as impressive as I expected. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that probably cost more than a year of my salary. And yet, despite the luxury, there was a certain emptiness. No family photos. No clutter. Just clean, sharp lines, like a hotel room someone lived in for too long. He motioned toward the couch. "Sit down for a minute." I obeyed, still unsure of the script I was supposed to follow. He moved slowly, with stiffness in his shoulders, and lowered himself into an armchair across from me. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," he said, almost reading my mind. I hesitated before answering. "A little, yes." He let out a humorless laugh. "My back's been killing me for weeks. Maybe months if I'm honest. Hours in that office chair, constant meetings, no time to exercise, it's catching up with me." He leaned forward, pressing his hand against the small of his back with a wince. "Some nights it gets so bad I can barely sleep. I thought about calling a professional, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I don't want strangers in my home. I trust you more." Those words again, "I trust you." They landed heavier this time. I wasn't sure I deserved that kind of trust, but I couldn't deny how much it stirred something inside me. "I don't really know anything about this," I admitted, trying to ground myself. "I mean, I've never done massage or therapy or anything like that." "You don't need training," he said quickly. "Just pressure. Just help me loosen up a little." He met my eyes, almost pleading. Please. That word, please, was not one I'd ever expected to hear from him. In the office he gave orders, not requests. But here, in this quiet apartment, he seemed human, vulnerable. And that vulnerability made it harder to refuse. Still, my stomach twisted. This isn't in my job description. This isn't what I signed up for. But could I really look at my boss, watch him grimace in pain, and say no? I shifted uncomfortably. "All right. I can try." Relief flickered across his face. He gestured to the couch. "Come here. Just press here around my shoulders. That's where it's worst." I stood, every step toward him heavier than the last. When I reached him, he turned slightly, resting his forearms on his knees so his back was exposed. The t-shirt stretched across his shoulders, showing the tension in his muscles. I hovered for a second, unsure where to place my hands. My mind raced. This is insane. I shouldn't be doing this. But it's just helping, nothing more. Finally, I pressed my palms gently onto his shoulders. He let out a low exhale, as if even that light touch gave some relief. "More pressure," he murmured. I pushed harder, kneading awkwardly. My hands weren't skilled, but I tried to mimic what I'd seen in movies, circling motions, pressing with my thumbs. He closed his eyes, his breathing slowing, and for a moment I felt oddly powerful, like I was easing something he couldn't fix himself. Yet the closeness unnerved me. His scent, clean soap, faint cologne, drifted toward me. His warmth seeped through the thin fabric. I was too aware of every small detail, every sound in the otherwise silent room. "This isn't so bad, is it?" he said softly, almost teasing. I swallowed hard. "I guess not. See? You're a quick learner." I tried to focus on the task, not the strangeness of the situation. My boss, sitting here in casual clothes, letting me touch him like this, it blurred the lines between professional and personal in a way that made my heart race. Minutes passed, though it felt longer. My hands grew tired, but he seemed lighter, his shoulders less tense. Then he leaned back slightly, his head tipping against the couch, a quiet sigh escaping him. "You're better at this than you think," he said, eyes still closed. I wasn't sure if it was praise or reassurance, but either way it made me flush. And yet, beneath the relief of helping, a persistent unease lingered. Why me? Why not a professional? Was this just about his back, or was there something more he wasn't saying? My thoughts tangled, hesitation knotting deeper. But I kept going because stopping felt like admitting weakness, and because some part of me, against all reason, wanted his approval. I thought I had found a rhythm. My hands pressed into his shoulders, then down his back, awkward but steady. He guided me here and there, a little higher, a bit firmer, and I obeyed, trying to ignore how strange it all was. Then it happened. I shifted my stance, leaning slightly closer to get more pressure into the small of his back. In the movement, my hand slipped lower than I intended, brushing against a place that sent an immediate jolt of alarm through me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "Sorry," I blurted, yanking my hand back as though I'd touched a hot stove. My face burned. "I didn't mean." But he didn't whirl around in anger. He didn't bark at me for being careless. Instead, he let out a quiet laugh, the kind I'd never heard from him in the office. Low, almost gentle. "It's fine," he said calmly. "Relax." I couldn't relax. My whole body was tense, my thoughts spiraling. What did I just do? What if this ruined everything? I stepped back slightly, wringing my hands. "I swear it was an accident," I rushed to explain. "I wasn't trying to." "I know." His voice was steady, reassuring. He glanced back at me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I know you didn't mean to." That only confused me more. His composure, his lack of anger, it wasn't what I expected. In the office he demanded perfection. Here he was, forgiving. I didn't know where to look. My mind screamed at me to stop, to make an excuse and leave before this went any further. But another voice whispered, "He isn't upset. He trusts you. Why are you panicking?" Still my chest felt tight. "Maybe I should go," I said quietly. He turned fully then, facing me. The lines of tension in his face had softened, though I could still see the weariness beneath his eyes. "I asked you here because I trust you," he said. "Not because I wanted to make things uncomfortable. If this feels wrong to you, you can walk out right now. I won't hold it against you." His words landed like a weight. There it was again, trust. It wasn't just about his back anymore, or even the strange intimacy of the situation. It was about the fact that this man, my boss, the one who rarely showed emotion in the office, was being vulnerable with me, offering me a choice. I sank onto the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. My heart was still racing, but his tone chipped away at the panic. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," I admitted. "I mean, this isn't my role. I'm supposed to be an employee, not—" I trailed off, unable to find the right word. "Not what?" he asked gently. I shrugged helplessly. "Not someone crossing this line." He leaned back, considering me. "Lines aren't always as rigid as people think. Yes, you work for me. But you're also a person I respect. Someone who's proven they can be relied on. I don't have many people like that in my life." I blinked, startled by the honesty. He wasn't the type to give compliments freely, let alone confessions like that. "You don't?" I asked. He shook his head. "Most people see me as the boss, the one with authority, the one who signs checks. They don't see me as someone who gets tired or sore or lonely." His gaze met mine. "But you've always been steady. I thought maybe you could handle seeing me like this without judgment." The room felt suddenly heavier, like his words filled the space between us. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to retreat, to put the wall back up, to return to the safety of being invisible. But another part, the one that had always longed to matter, couldn't ignore the weight of what he was offering. Not orders, not demands, trust. "I don't want to let you down," I said quietly. "You won't," he replied. We sat in silence for a moment. The city lights glowed through the windows, casting pale reflections across the room. I could hear the faint hum of traffic far below, but up here, it was just us, Two people navigating a boundary neither of us had expected to cross. Finally, he leaned forward slightly. Will you try again? The question hung in the air. My pulse thudded in my ears. Saying yes meant stepping further into unfamiliar territory, into a space where the roles of boss and employee blurred. Saying no meant retreating, shutting the door on whatever fragile trust had formed tonight. I hesitated, the battle inside me louder than ever. But his eyes held mine, steady, patient, not commanding but asking. Slowly I nodded. Okay. Relief flickered across his face, subtle but undeniable. He shifted back into position, leaning forward with his arms resting on his knees again. Just here, he said softly, pointing to his shoulders. That's all. I placed my hands back on him, more carefully this time, more aware of every movement. My fingers pressed into the tight muscles, and he let out a quiet breath, almost a sigh. This time, I wasn't just following instructions. I was aware of the unspoken understanding between us, that something had shifted. The hesitation was still there, but it was accompanied by a strange sense of connection, as if the air between us carried more than words. Minutes passed, and though the closeness still made me nervous, I kept going. He didn't push for more. He didn't test the boundary further. He simply sat there, letting me help him, and I realized that maybe this was what he'd wanted all along. Not perfection, not professionalism, but presence. When I finally pulled back, my hands aching, he turned slightly and gave me a faint smile. It wasn't the polished, authoritative smile he used in meetings. It was smaller, realer. Thank you, he said simply. I nodded, unsure what to do with the warmth that spread through me at those words. You're welcome. The line between professional and personal had been crossed. But instead of disaster, it had led to something else, something I didn't fully understand yet but couldn't ignore. And as I gathered my things to leave, I knew one thing: this wouldn't be the last time. I thought that night would end with me slipping quietly out of his apartment, going home, and trying to make sense of what had just happened. But as I gathered my bag ready to leave, he surprised me. Wait a moment, he said. I turned. He wasn't standing in the commanding posture I usually saw in the office. He was still seated on the couch, shoulders hunched slightly forward, hands clasped as though he was bracing himself. There was a heaviness in his expression, the kind that didn't come from deadlines or numbers, but from something deeper. I need to be honest with you, he began. His voice wasn't the clipped, efficient tone of a manager. It was slower, quieter, as though each word had to fight its way past his pride. What I asked of you tonight, it wasn't just about back pain. My breath caught. My instincts prickled. Here it comes, I thought. The explanation. The hidden motive. He rubbed the back of his neck. Don't get me wrong, the pain is real. But it's more than that. The truth is, I'm lonely. The word dropped between us, heavy and startling. Lonely. I had never imagined him saying that. At work, he was the picture of control. Meetings, negotiations, firm handshakes. He gave off the impression of someone who didn't need anyone. To hear him admit loneliness was almost jarring. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. He went on. When you're in my position, people don't see you. They see the title, the paycheck, the authority. They laugh at your jokes even when they're not funny. They agree with you even when you're wrong. And when the day ends, you go home to silence. He looked toward the city skyline through his wide windows. I thought success would fill that silence. It didn't. I shifted on my feet, the strap of my bag digging into my shoulder. And that's where I come in? His eyes flicked back to me. You're different. You don't flatter. You don't fake. You show up, you do the work, you endure without asking for applause. That matters more than you realize. The sincerity in his tone unnerved me. I wanted to believe it, yet a part of me whispered that this was dangerous, that mixing personal and professional lines never ended cleanly. I forced a small laugh, more nervous than amused. So you want me to be your, what? Personal assistant? After-hours therapist? Amateur masseuse? He shook his head. No, I don't want labels. I just want someone I can trust. Someone to be there. Not just as an employee but as a person. The words hit harder than I expected. Be there for me. It was both simple and complicated, tempting and terrifying. I set my bag down slowly. You do realize how unusual this sounds, right? Of course. His lips curved in the faintest smile. I'm not blind. I know this isn't normal. And I know you have every right to walk away. But I also know that if you stay, if you're willing to be more than just another employee, I can make sure you're taken care of. That last part made my chest tighten. The promise hung in the air, threaded with implication. Taken care of. Was this an offer of mentorship, of advancement? Or was it something murkier? You're talking about promotion, I said carefully. Promotion, he confirmed. Support. A future here that reflects the loyalty you've already shown. But beyond that, his voice softened. A connection. Something real. I looked down at my shoes, heart hammering. The offer glowed like a door cracked open. Behind it could be opportunity, growth, maybe even the recognition I'd long wanted. But it could also be a trap, a tangled mess of blurred lines and expectations I wasn't sure I could live up to. This feels like exploitation, I admitted. Like you're asking too much. He didn't flinch. I won't deny it could look that way. But that's not my intention. I don't want to use you. I want to trust you. And I want you to trust me. Trust. Again, that word. It had followed me all night, wrapping around every hesitation like a net I couldn't escape. I sank onto the edge of the armchair opposite him, running a hand through my hair. Why me? I asked finally. Out of everyone in the company, why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you remind me of myself before the world hardened me. You still believe in effort and integrity. You haven't learned to fake everything. I see that in you. And I don't want to lose it. The sincerity in his eyes unsettled me. It wasn't just flattery. He meant it. I don't know if I can do what you're asking, I admitted. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. Then don't commit to forever. Just try. Give it a chance. See where it leads. No pressure, no contract. Just try. His voice was low, steady, almost coaxing. It didn't sound like an order, it sounded like a plea. I sat there torn in half. My practical side screamed at me to draw the line. To protect myself. To keep this professional. But another part, hungry for recognition, for connection, for something beyond spreadsheets and late nights, was curious. What happens if I say yes? I asked quietly. Then I keep my promise, he said. I'll mentor you. I'll help you grow here. You won't be overlooked anymore. And beyond that, maybe you'll find something more valuable than a title. And if I say no? He gave a small shrug. Then you leave tonight and we go back to how things were. No hard feelings. I won't punish you for honesty. That answer surprised me. I had expected subtle threats or guilt. Instead, he offered me freedom. The silence stretched as I weighed my options. My pulse pounded in my ears. Saying yes meant stepping into something undefined, dangerous, maybe even foolish. Saying no meant retreating to safety, but safety had never gotten me far. Finally, I exhaled. I'll try. His expression softened, almost imperceptibly, but enough for me to notice. Relief, maybe even gratitude, flickered across his face. Thank you, he said simply. I nodded, though my stomach was still twisted in knots. I wasn't sure if I'd made the right decision. All I knew was that the line between professional and personal had been crossed completely now, and there was no turning back. As I left his apartment that night, the city air felt colder than usual. My steps were steady, but my mind was a storm. I had agreed to something I didn't fully understand. And though a part of me was curious, another part whispered, "What have you just stepped into?" The days after that night unfolded differently than I expected. I thought I'd wake up the next morning full of regret, ready to avoid him at all costs, but the opposite happened. He sought me out, not in a forceful way but in quiet moments that felt almost deliberate. At the office, he would stop by my desk with a casual comment that no one else would think twice about. A question about a report, a reminder about a meeting. But then, under his breath, just for me, "Dinner tonight?" Or, "Stay a few minutes after work, I want to talk." And I found myself agreeing. Not because I felt obligated, but because some part of me wanted to. The first dinner was at a quiet Italian place tucked away from the main streets. He had a table reserved in the back, away from the crowd. It was strange at first, sitting across from him without a stack of papers between us. The waiter handed us menus, and for the first time, I noticed how his shoulders relaxed when he laughed. "You always order coffee in the office," he said, studying me over his glass of wine. "Do you ever eat anything besides instant noodles and vending machine snacks?" I blinked, surprised. "You noticed that?" He smirked. "I notice more than you think." That night, we talked about small things. Favorite foods, music, even bad television shows. He admitted he had a weakness for old detective dramas, the kind I thought only retirees watched. I teased him for it, and instead of bristling like I expected, he laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite, curated one he used at work, but something unguarded. After dinner, we walked a few blocks before parting ways. He didn't offer me a ride, didn't make it feel like an obligation. It was just comfortable. That comfort grew in the days that followed. Sometimes it was late-night talks in his office after everyone else had gone home. Sometimes it was ordering takeout and sharing it while we worked through a deadline. Once, he noticed my tie was crooked before a client meeting and reached out to straighten it without thinking. The touch was brief, but it lingered in my mind far longer than it should have. I began to notice the small things about him too. How he rubbed the bridge of his nose when he was stressed. How he had a habit of rolling his pen between his fingers when deep in thought. How his tone softened when he spoke to me outside of earshot of others. One night, after a long day, we sat in his apartment again, this time with takeout boxes spread out on the coffee table. He had kicked off his shoes and I sat cross-legged on the opposite couch. It didn't feel like boss and employee anymore. It felt like two people sharing a space. "Why do you stay so late all the time?" he asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. I shrugged. "Someone has to keep things from falling apart." He gave me a look, one part amused, one part serious. "That's not your job. You're not supposed to carry it all." "No," I said quietly, poking at the food with my fork, "but if I don't, who will?" He didn't answer right away. Then, softer, "That's exactly why I trust you." The words warmed me more than the food. And yet, I couldn't shake the thought, maybe this wasn't just about trust anymore. Over the next week, the rhythm continued. Shared meals, lingering conversations, unexpected moments of closeness. I found myself laughing more than I had in months, sometimes at his dry humor, sometimes at my own nervous remarks. There was one evening when we worked late in his office. Papers were scattered across the desk, the city skyline glowing behind us. At some point, the conversation drifted from business to life. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Regret what?" "Climbing this high. Having all this responsibility." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Sometimes. Success looks glamorous from the outside, but it's a lonely view from the top." His eyes flicked back to me. "That's why I need someone like you." I should have felt uneasy. Instead, I felt a strange kind of pride. Like I mattered in a way I never had before. The shift was subtle but undeniable. At first, I had told myself I was doing this for the perks, for the promise of mentorship, promotion, recognition. But as the days passed, I realized I wasn't counting the perks anymore. I was counting the moments. The laughter, the late-night talks, the quiet dinners. And though I resisted admitting it even to myself, I began to notice things I shouldn't. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The warmth in his voice when he said my name. The casual touches, a hand on my shoulder, a brush of his arm against mine, that lingered in my thoughts long after. One evening, as we stood by the window of his apartment, the city spread out beneath us like a field of stars, he spoke again. "You seem different," he said. "How so?" "Lighter. Happier maybe." I looked out at the skyline, avoiding his gaze. "Maybe I am." He was quiet for a moment, then said almost to himself, "So am I." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was charged, yes, but in a way that made my chest tighten rather than my stomach twist. I realized then, with startling clarity, I wasn't just hesitant anymore. I wasn't just curious. I was drawn to him. Against all logic, against every professional boundary I had set for myself, I wanted to be there. Not for the promotion, not for the support, but for him. It was terrifying. And yet, it felt inevitable. It was late, later than usual, when the moment finally came. The office had emptied hours ago, the cleaners long gone. We were in his apartment again, the city below us lit like a sea of restless stars. Takeout cartons sat half empty on the table, the glow from a single lamp softening the sharp edges of the room. He looked different that night, tired in a way that wasn't just physical. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes shadowed. For the first time, he didn't try to hide it. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this pace," he said suddenly, his voice low, almost cracked. "Everyone expects me to be the one with answers. The strong one. The one who never falters." I set down my drink, surprised by the rawness in his tone. He had always been the anchor, steady even under pressure. To see him like this unsettled me. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "The truth is, I'm exhausted. Not just from work, but from the act of pretending. Pretending that I don't get lonely. Pretending I don't feel the weight of it all." Silence stretched between us, heavy with words unsaid. For once, I didn't try to fill it. I just let him breathe. When he finally spoke again, it was softer. "I've built this image, successful, composed, in control. But when I go home at night, it's just me in the silence. And sometimes, the silence is louder than the meetings, louder than the stress." I swallowed hard. I knew loneliness too, not the loneliness of being at the top, but the loneliness of being unseen. Invisible in the office, overlooked by family, always the background character in other people's lives. I get it, I said quietly. His eyes flicked to me. Do you? I nodded slowly. Maybe not in the same way. But I know what it's like to feel invisible. To show up every day, give everything you have, and still feel like you don't matter. That's why I hesitated back when you first asked me to come here. I thought I was just filling another role, another obligation. I paused, forcing myself to admit what I'd buried for weeks. I was scared. Scared of being used. Scared of crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But mostly scared that if I let myself care, it would all disappear, and I'd be left emptier than before. The words hung in the air, fragile but freeing. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. It's not about control, he said firmly. It never was. I don't want to own you or trap you. I just wanted someone I could stop pretending with. Someone who would see me as more than a title. His honesty cracked something in me. I had been telling myself for weeks that this was transactional, that I was here for the promotion, the mentorship, the recognition. But the truth, the dangerous, undeniable truth, was that I had stayed for him. I think I see you more than you realize, I whispered. For a moment, neither of us moved. The city buzzed faintly beyond the glass, but in that room it was quiet, just the two of us caught in a fragile balance. Finally he exhaled, a long, unsteady breath. I've been afraid to admit it, he said. But I look forward to this. To you. More than I should. My pulse quickened. You're not the only one. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. His eyes widened, just slightly, as if he hadn't expected me to mirror his confession. But once spoken I couldn't take them back. And I didn't want to. For the first time, it wasn't about expectations or promises or blurred lines. It was about two people admitting, in the simplest terms, that they wanted to be seen by each other. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, almost as if in relief. Then maybe this isn't as complicated as we've made it. Or maybe it is, I countered with a shaky laugh. But I don't care anymore. He opened his eyes, and the look he gave me was unlike any I'd seen before. It wasn't the guarded gaze of a boss, or the measured look of a mentor. It was open, vulnerable, human. And in that gaze I found my own walls crumbling. The hesitancy that had defined every step of this journey gave way to something else. Something scarier but also infinitely more real. At last I said the words I had been too afraid to voice. I want this. Not just the promotion, not just the recognition. You. For a long moment he didn't reply. Then slowly he nodded. And I want you. The simplicity of it nearly undid me. We didn't rush forward, didn't try to define it with titles or promises. We just sat there, letting the air between us settle into something new, something fragile but undeniable. That night marked the shift. It was no longer about transactions, no longer about blurred boundaries or power. It was about connection, raw, imperfect but real. As I left his apartment later, the city lights no longer looked cold. They shimmered with possibility. And for the first time since it began, I wasn't afraid. If someone had told me weeks ago that a late-night overtime call would change everything, I would have laughed. Back then, I was the invisible one, reliable, unnoticed, quietly doing the work no one praised. My boss was untouchable, larger than life, a man who commanded every room. And I was just another face in the crowd. But standing here now, I can see the whole arc. The confusion, the fear, the blurred lines, and how those lines eventually became a bridge. The transition wasn't sudden. It happened slowly, quietly, in ways almost invisible to outsiders. At first, it was the dinners, the late-night talks, the shared moments of vulnerability. Then it was the laughter, the easy companionship, the comfort of knowing someone finally saw me. Somewhere between those moments, my hesitancy melted into something else. Trust, affection, love. And he kept his promises. A month later, my role in the company shifted. The promotion he had spoken of wasn't a vague promise. It was real. My name appeared on the updated organizational chart, my salary adjusted, my responsibilities expanded. Colleagues who once brushed past me now noticed when I spoke. But even as the perks piled up, I realized they weren't the most important thing. What mattered was the look in his eyes when he turned to me after a long meeting. What mattered was the way he saved me the last bite of dessert at dinner, or the late-night calls that weren't about work but about life. What mattered was that, in him, I found not just a mentor, not just a leader, but a partner. There were whispers, of course. Office gossip thrives where boundaries shift. People wondered why he lingered at my desk, why I was suddenly included in closed-door discussions. At first, I panicked, afraid the rumors would destroy everything. But when I voiced those fears, he surprised me again. "Let them talk," he said one evening as we walked out together. "They don't know the truth. And the truth is, I'm not ashamed of this. Of us." The words hit me harder than any promotion. Not ashamed. It was the first time I realized he wasn't just protecting me, he was choosing me. That night, we sat side by side in the back of a quiet cafe, no company logos, no boardrooms, no roles to play. Just two people, leaning close, laughing about nothing. And in the middle of it, he reached across the table and took my hand. Not secretly, not cautiously, just openly. "Is this okay?" he asked softly. I squeezed his hand back. "It's more than okay." From that moment on, the hesitancy that had haunted me was gone. I wasn't afraid of being used anymore. I wasn't afraid of losing myself. Because I had already found something greater than fear, something I hadn't even realized I was searching for. Well, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded grand gestures. It was quieter, steadier. It was staying up late together, trading stories over coffee. It was walking out of the office side by side, laughing at private jokes. It was planning for the first time, not just tomorrow's deadlines but weekends, holidays, maybe even a trip away from the city. We started small. A weekend getaway, just 2 days in a coastal town, away from the constant hum of phones and meetings. I remember walking along the pier with him, the sea air whipping against our faces, and realizing that the man beside me wasn't just my boss anymore. He was the person I wanted beside me in every part of my life. That trip became the turning point. We talked openly, without the safety net of excuses or blurred boundaries. And by the time we drove back into the city, it wasn't an arrangement anymore. It was a commitment. Partners. The word felt right even if we didn't say it aloud right away. But in the way he looked at me, in the way I leaned into him without hesitation, it was clear. We weren't walking two separate paths anymore. We were building one together. And so, from then on, life changed, not in an instant but in a steady unfolding. At work, we remained professional. To the world, we were still boss and employee. But in the spaces between, after hours, late nights, weekends, we were simply us. I often think back to that first night when I hesitated at his door, unsure if I should step inside. How close I was to walking away, to missing all of this. And now, looking at where we stand, I can only feel grateful that I stayed. Because what began as confusion, as fear of exploitation, has become the opposite. It's not about control, not about power, not about titles. It's about connection, about finding someone who sees you, truly sees you, and choosing to walk forward together. One evening as we left the office, he slipped his arm around my shoulders in a way that felt natural, unforced. The city was alive around us, horns blaring, neon lights buzzing, but in that moment, it felt like we had stepped into our own little world. We laughed about something trivial, probably a mistake in a report or a bad pun one of us had made, but the laughter lingered easy and warm. He turned to me then, his smile genuine, unguarded. And I thought, this is it. This is happiness. Not the kind promised by promotions or paychecks, not the fleeting rush of recognition, but the quiet joy of being seen, chosen, loved. As we walked down the street together, side by side, planning where we might go next weekend, my heart was steady. No more fear. No more hesitation. Just the certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. And in that certainty, a final reflection settled in my mind. What started as a call for overtime turned into the love that rewrote my life. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps us reach more people. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories and let us know in the comments. Have you ever found love in the most unexpected place? We'd love to hear your thoughts.